Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a really basic guide to building your classical music library. Now, so far, we've done 6 videos in this series, and we've covered 3 iconic symphonies and 3 iconic concertos. But now we're turning to shorter orchestral works. And I have to say, straight off, if you find the idea of sitting down on your keister and listening to half an hour or 40 minutes of purely orchestral music without words somewhat intimidating, and many people do, and they're not wrong, then start with something shorter. Get your feel for the territory, and then go to the longer pieces. It's a perfectly legitimate way to do it, and it works really well. It worked for me when I was a kid. I mean, as a kid, I had a short attention span, and I had, my mom's record collection, and we had discs called things like classical music for people who hate classical music, where you had excerpts and little sniglets and short works, and it was wonderful. The music was terrific. You only got the main tunes, but it was fine. So today we're talking about a tone poem, a symphonic tone poem in sound and a description of something, however amorphous, and in particular, Finlandia by Sibelius. Now, this is Sibelius's most popular work. It's the one that everybody kind of knows, even if they don't know they know it. I mean, if you saw the Die Hard movies, the opening of Finlandia and the rest of it was like, the happy part. There was the threatening part and the happy part. That was the one where the planes were stuck, I think, circulating around all the time. And I remember seeing the movie and keep hearing, yeah-dum, yeah-dum. Well, that's the opening of Finlandia. And I was like, oh, gee, that sounds like Finlandia. But it was very cleverly worked into the fabric of the score. And then finally at the end, when, Bruce Willis triumphs and everybody's, being happy and they've blown up the bad guys, you hear the zippy part. It's fun to play, by the way. I've played it a bunch of times in community orchestras. Sibelius wrote Finlandia at a time when Finland was just beginning to emerge as a nation itself. It was a Grand Duchy of Russia for most of its life. And in 1899, 1900, which is when this happened, any kind of protest against Russian rule was censored heavily. And so Sibelius wrote Finlandia as part of a suite of pieces called the Press Celebrations Music. Now, the original form of the Press Celebrations Music was unknown until a few years ago. And since then, the whole thing has been recorded with Finlandia in it. And it sounds rather different from the final version. Sibelius was a reviser. He always polished and honed and rejiggered everything to try and find the ideal form. It's only about, 7, 8, 9 minutes long, somewhere in there, depending on the tempos. But originally, it's very interesting. It was called Finland Awakes or something like that. But in the original Press Celebrations music, that was a series of tableaux vivants. Now, you know what a tableau vivant is? We don't do those anymore, particularly now that we have like TV and whatnot. A tableau vivant is when you would take a painting or a picture or some sort of subject and stage it like a portrait, but with real people and scenery, and they would all just freeze, and then the music would play, supposedly accompanying the tableau vivant. I mean, that's what it was. And people used to do that, actually. They would go to the theater and they would display a painting, and you'd look at the painting, and then they'd open the curtain, and there would be the painting, and they would have an orchestra that would accompany you watching the scene. It must have been just thrilling. Anyway, so as part of these tableaux vivants, they were supposed to illustrate the history of the Finnish nation and actually the advent of industrialism and the first Finnish railroad. And that's what Finlandia kind of illustrated, or at least so I'm told. And it was only later, when Sibelius took the piece out separately and made a separate work from it, that it became what we know and love as Finlandia, although they had to call it different things back then because, the censors would have been annoyed. The hymn tune, which is very beautiful, This is my homeland, this is my native land. I don't know if those are the words, but those are the ones I learned. Lots of people think that that is sort of the Finnish national anthem. It's not. And I don't think it ever was, actually. It's a little too short. It's a beautiful hymn tune. It's become a church hymn in many places. And it was also the national anthem of Biafra for the 3 years that that African country existed. Biafra, in case you've forgotten, was East Nigeria, which declared its independence, and that didn't go too well. But for 3 years, they had Finlandia, the hymn tune, as their national anthem. And there's a trivia question for you. Actually, I wish I could say that I just knew it. I read it on Wikipedia. But, still, I did my research, so there you go. So Finlandia is a brilliant, wonderful piece. It occurs it has basically, 1, 2, 3 sections. First, you've got the menacing, grinding, fabulous opening with snarling brass corns and roiling timpani. And oh my God, it's just beyond exciting. This becomes a hymn in the strings, rather grim, actually. I mean, it's sort of stern and stoic. Then there are brass fanfares, which go bump, 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 like that. And light breaks out when I come in playing the cymbals. Chung, cha-da-da, chum, bum, bum, ba-doo-doo-doo, da-da-da, 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 like that. So you get that bit, which is heroic and exciting and full of revolutionary fervor. Then it calms down, and you get the anthem, that beautiful little anthem in the woodwinds, underpinned by a soft bass drum roll, which you almost never hear in recordings. And then the happy bit comes back, and the hymn surmounts the entire work, and it ends. It's very punctual. It has no dead spots. It has no excess anywhere. It's just a really compact, exciting piece of orchestral music, which, whatever you think of Finland when it's over, it's wonderfully well written, and it richly deserves its popularity. Now, Sibelius achieved things in larger media. He wrote fabulous symphonies, one of the great symphonists that ever lived, and bigger, longer, more extensive tone poems. But this is a great place to start. I mean, it's just a beautiful, enjoyable, wonderful piece of music. And, people sometimes look down on miniatures or shorter works. It's like, well, they did great things. Well, this is a great thing. It's absolutely a great thing. It's perfect, exactly as it stands. And one of the goals, I think, of, building your classical music library and listening to this music is to be able to appreciate all sizes and all shapes and all forms and whatever it comes, and just recognize great stuff when you hear it. So this is great stuff. Give it a shot if you haven't heard it. Or if you haven't heard it in a while, give it a listen. You'd be surprised. Just, when I knew this thing by heart by the time I was like 10, because I was on classical music for people who hate classical music, played by Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops. And I loved it. And then when I was in 4th grade, I had this psychotic teacher who I've talked about before, by the way. She gave us numbers instead of names. I went through the 4th grade as number 10. She was an ex-nun who thought that being a nun wasn't strict enough. So she would inflict her idea of discipline on a bunch of innocent school-age children. Anyway, we studied Finland, and so she played Finlandia. So that came back when I was in 4th grade. And then, I just loved Sibelius. So it was always part of my natural Sibelius, life. But of course, like so many people who love Sibelius, you tend to gravitate towards his larger pieces, his more important pieces, if you want to call them that. And so, you kind of shunt it off to the side, and I let it sit. And then, after a few years of not paying any attention to Finlandia, I plonked it back on, and wow. I mean, it was amazing. It doesn't date. It's incredibly fresh. It sounds just marvelous. It's good sometimes to give things a rest and then come back to them and listen with fresh ears, because you hear things you didn't hear before, like that soft bass drum roll underneath the anthem when it first appears in the woodwind section. And you also get a chance. I mean, you're a different person with different experiences. So the music speaks to you differently. And that's the joy of this hobby. It stays with you for your entire life and never gets old, at least not in my view. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.